So welcome everybody. My name is Katie Lebedz, and I am so honored to be able to have you today to talk about emotional intelligence in the workplace. So for those of you that don't know me, I am Katie Lebedz. I am the president and CEO of a lean consulting firm called Learning to Lean, and I am based out of Hortonville, Wisconsin. I am a Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt and certified project management professional, along with an emotional intelligence coach and author. I've written 3 books: How to Improve Absolutely Anything, How to Improve Absolutely Every Process, and the Learning to Lean CI Planner. I've been doing lean, continuous improvement, project management, leadership coaching, etc., for the past 20 years because I started when I was 12. Okay. So let's continue on. In today's session, we are going to talk about emotional intelligence. Where did it come from? We'll talk about intrapersonal versus interpersonal. We'll look at your EQ assessment. So if you had time to take the EQ assessment, great. If not, no worries. We'll talk about emotions. And what do we do when others are not at the same level as you? So first, emotional intelligence. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to interrupt me or put it in chat. I'll do my best to monitor all of this. So emotional intelligence, what exactly is it? It's your ability to understand and manage the emotions of yourself and of others. That's what it is at a high level summary. You understand and you recognize the emotions in yourself, and you can also recognize those emotions in others. So where did it come from? Well, Daniel Goleman wrote this book called Emotional Intelligence, why it can matter more than IQ. So emotional intelligence is also known as EQ, emotional quotient. So that's why you see EQ. And also, high IQ does not equal success. So when we get to a slide with Slido question on it, it'll have the Slido number back on it again. So we'll be able to see that here in just a second. So what information is in the book at a high level, and what does this mean to us? So it was found in the book, he talks about that it was a critical factor in determining somebody's long-term success. So 90% of top job performers have high EQ or emotional intelligence, emotional quotient, compared to 20% of the low performers. So if you look in IT, which is a little bit of my background, programmers in the top 10th percentile of EQ could produce software 3 times faster than the ones with low EQ. Now, faster doesn't always mean better. Faster doesn't always mean without errors. So we need to put that caveat in there. But people with higher IQ in sales roles outperform those with medium to low IQ by 50%. So that's some pretty significant data and statistics. Also, that they found that higher IQ or EQ, pardon me, equals higher income. So higher emotional intelligence equals higher income. So people with a high EQ typically on average make about $29,000 more a year than those with low EQ. And of course, it's across industries. Now, that book is several years old now. So that number, 29,000, is probably significantly higher now, as we know everything has changed in our world when it comes to salaries and cost of living, et cetera. So EQ can improve thinking and creative skills because it gives you flexibility to look at problems from different perspectives. So it does, having a higher EQ gives you resilience and flexibility. And as we know, we need that in the environment that we're in right now. And high EQ also helps to improve your leadership skills. So that's why it's really important that we take some self-reflecting time and sessions like this to understand what it means to have high EQ and how to be able to improve your own emotional intelligence. So if you're a leader with high EQ, you can empathize greater, communicate in a manner in which resonates with multiple types of learners. And if you've ever been to a class with me, you know that we talk about that quite a bit. Allows you to inspire and influence meet the needs of your team, and lead better in a more productive work environment. Now, that's you as a leader, and being a leader, being inspired as a high EQ leader. We're also going to talk about, as we get a little bit further in our discussion, we're going to talk about what happens if you're a high EQ leader and you don't have people with high EQ on your team. And that's a challenge. People with high EQ report more fulfilled and satisfied with their jobs. And it's been found also to decrease work-related accidents, which is interesting. So there's all the background on emotional intelligence. But EQ, again, is how we manage ours and others' emotions. Now, if you had a chance to take the survey that I posted in on social media, great. If you've maybe taken one of these before, fantastic. If not, no worries. If you did take it, where were you on the EQ scale overall? So again, we're on Slido. If you go to slido.com or use the QR code with your phone, and you can go to our 7029215. So, and I can't see the answers, meaning I can see the responses like we see on the screen now, but I cannot see who has responded to what. So there's complete anonymity for this. All right, got a couple responses. I like Slido because it allows us to interact virtually and in real time. So as people respond, we get the answers on the screen. Now, I don't expect everybody to have had the opportunity to take the test. There are many versions of that test, of course. You can take a 5-question, a 10-question. When I teach this class in person, we actually do 75 questions, which doesn't take as long as you think it does. So it's pretty quick, but we do that together. So everyone takes it and does their own score. And then if they feel comfortable, we talk out loud about the results. And it's been really interesting to be able to see that. So it looks like we have a tie between mid EQ and high EQ. So that's fantastic. That means we have some learning opportunities. So as I mentioned, with emotional intelligence, the first way to understand it is to look at intrapersonal and interpersonal. So the components of EQ, intrapersonal intelligence, means your ability to be aware of your mood, your emotions, and your motives. So how to manage them and how to redirect them and your behaviors, and your ability to be flexible, thinking before reacting, open to change, and know how your emotions affect others. So this can be absolutely at home, as it can be at work also. So I have a funny story to tell you. This literally happened to me about 2 hours ago. I got stuck in a car wash. So I was moving between appointments. I had a doctor's appointment and I was coming back to the office to prepare for our session today. And I thought I would take my husband's giant truck through the car wash. And I literally got stuck in the car wash. And as my emotions started to honestly take over, I knew that the way I was behaving was going to affect my phone call to my husband to tell him I was stuck, and also the phone call to the person that had the call number. Luckily, I could get out of it by getting out of my truck, and the end door was open. So, but there was a bar that was stuck in front of my truck. So I was able to walk around the building and call. And I had to put my emotion in check because I had a lot of things that I would like to have left on that voicemail that I chose not to. And I'm sure that person was having a bad day too. So I tried to be as professional as possible. But I did make sure that before I started the voicemail message, I had my emotions in check. I was frustrated. I was angry. I was anxious. And I knew all that. So that could have gone 2 different ways, but I tried to keep my emotions in check. Ended up bending the bar out of the way to sneak the giant truck outside. So, but it happens. It happens in real life. I've definitely had situations at work where you have to manage your emotions. I was just speaking with somebody this morning and they said, next week's going to be a hard week. I have some really difficult conversations to have with some people. So she's already preparing, she's already aware of her emotions, and she is already anticipating, based on knowing her audience or the people that work for her, their reactions, and then her appropriate response to that. So that's intrapersonal. So interpersonal, though, intelligence is social awareness and the ability to manage relationships. So your ability to understand other people's moods, behaviors, and motives, right? And to understand the core of the issue. And the ability to manage and influence others' emotions through empathy. And I can say from all the classes that I've taught in regards to emotional intelligence, the common theme is empathy. And mainly, to be honest, people's lack of empathy. And that's something that I've had many people have reached out and said that they need to work on. So those interpersonal skills help people build rapport, find common ground, and connect with others. So we know if we are, if you have a partner, we know immediately, right, what their moods are, right, what their behaviors are, or if they suddenly become quiet, or they start slamming doors, or whatever it may be, right? It doesn't take a rocket scientist to be able to read that. But maybe you're in a position, which I know some of you may be, where you have 50 or 100 people that work for you. So how can you be able to understand and recognize emotions in such a variety of people? Or maybe you're starting in a new company, right? And it takes time to develop those skills. So as we continue our discussion on emotional intelligence, the first slice of it is intrapersonal and interpersonal. So intra, yourself, inter, recognizing that in others. Now, as we dive into emotional intelligence, there are different factors. So when you take an assessment, you will probably see that it looks at self-awareness, it looks at motivation, and empathy, as I just mentioned, social skills, and managing emotions. So what does that mean? And then I'm going to ask you where you are, or maybe where you think you are if you didn't have a chance to take the assessment. So let's see where you are with self-awareness and emotional awareness. That means you can recognize what you're feeling. You can recognize that you're angry or you have anxiety. You recognize your habitual response to an event, right? And you recognize how emotions affect behavior and performance. So maybe you work in an environment where your boss comes into your office and says, or your area and says, do you have a minute to talk? Right? Nobody wants to hear that, personally or professionally, generally, and your stomach just goes whoop, whoop, right? You feel anxiety for the most part in many situations. Or maybe you're in an environment where you're like, yes, I'm ready to talk, let's go. And it's always good news. So it all depends on the approach and, again, some of those habits and our responses, and recognizing that to be able to say, they didn't even say anything bad, they just asked if I had a minute. So when you are self-aware, you see yourself as others do too. Now let's look at managing emotions or emotional management. Being able to stay focused and clearly and think clearly, even when you're feeling powerful emotions, right? So being able to continue to have a conversation, even though that you may be upset. Managing your own emotional states, your responsibility. So if you feel like you may not be able to manage your emotional state at the moment, a suggestion, maybe you need to close your door. Maybe you need to go to the restroom. Maybe you even need to take a walk around the building until you can pull yourself back together and manage your emotions and what's happening to you. Now, for those of us that are hybrid, right, or maybe you're just working from home, I think that takes even a greater significance, right? Because we are surrounded by having work at home all the time and having home at home all the time. So really, you do need to step away, right? You do need to walk down the driveway and go to the mailbox. Maybe you even need to just take the car out and to get gas, right? You just need to step away from that environment because you are surrounded so much by it. And maybe if you can't step away because you have kids or whatever, maybe it's just, again, go into a room that you can close the door and have a few minutes to meditate or think on your own. What about motivating others or emotional management? So your ability to use your deepest emotions to move and guide you towards your goals. So motivating yourself to take on an initiative and persevere in the face of obstacles and setbacks. My mom used to say to me, she's like, you have the ability to pull yourself up from your bootstraps. And if you don't know, I ride horses, so that makes a lot of sense, and keep going. And I have an inherent drive inside myself to just keep going. What's the next thing? What's around the next corner? Right? So, how do you keep yourself motivated? What motivates you? And it's important to recognize what you are motivated by. Is it title? Is it experience? Is it giving back? Is it money? Right? And making sure that you understand what motivates you. And then you can even become a better leader by understanding what your team is motivated by. Now, let's look at empathy or relationship management. We talked about this a little bit already, that this seems to be the area in which many people have an opportunity. So, your ability to understand, sense, and respond to what other people are feeling. And you have to be careful sometimes, because if you are an extraordinarily empathetic person, that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with it. But sometimes as empaths, you have the ability to take on the feelings of other people. So if somebody's really upset over something, sometimes you will get upset over that too, without even really knowing that you are absorbing that emotion from other people and not separating yourself from that environment. So again, if you're not aware of your own emotions, it's going to be really hard to read the emotions of others. And then social skills. It's your ability to manage and influence and inspire emotions in others. So handle emotions in relationships, being able to influence is an essential foundational skill for successful teamwork and leadership. So how do you manage yourself in a social environment? I was teaching this class to a group of people, and the director of operations, or the person that was running the plant, raised his hand and he said, I will be honest with you. He told his whole team, I struggle in social environments. I struggle with it. I have a problem with my social skills and I know it. I bring my wife with me to events because it makes me feel more comfortable. And I think for a lot of people, they had an aha moment of, oh, that's why he's always so distant or not talking or whatever during social interactions. He said, it just makes me feel uncomfortable. And he said, I'm working through it. I at least recognize it. And he said, but that may be why I feel, or you may feel like I'm standoffish if we do social things, because this is an area of opportunity for him. Which I give him kudos for admitting that to his entire team. He didn't have to, but he chose to. So as we look at or compare and contrast, somebody that's lower on the scale for EQ versus higher on the scale for EQ, and these are very much generalizations. So lower on the EQ, they may come off as aggressive, demanding, maybe egotistical. I'm not quite sure I like the word bossy or confrontational though. Higher EQ, they'll come off as assertive and ambitious, driving, strong-willed, and decisive. Low EQ, they may be easily distracted, glib, selfish, poor listener, and impulsive. I have a friend that struggled with that, and sometimes I would just try to help her and say, let's just take a minute to understand what's going on instead of just having an impulsive reaction to this and maybe doing something that you're going to regret later. So if you're higher on the EQ scale, you're warm and enthusiastic, sociable and charming and persuasive. If you're lower, your resistance to change, and that's exactly what I see for people that are resistant to change. You see them crossing the arms in front of them, and unresponsive, slow, or we may consider them stubborn. I was working with an organization once and I needed them to fill out a registration form. And I had a gentleman do exactly that, put his arms in front of his chest and say, I'm not filling that form out. Okay. So that kind of gave me a heads up to what the rest of the class is going to be like with him. If you're higher on the EQ scale, you're generally patient and stable, predictable, consistent, and a good listener. Lower on the EQ scale, critical, picky, fussy. Higher, detailed, careful, meticulous. Now again, generalizations, and I'm sure, just like me, we can see some of our characteristics sprinkled out through both the high and the low. So if you took the test, or based on what we just discussed, which area do you need to focus on the most? So whether you took the assessment or not, and your knowledge now of self-awareness, motivation, empathy, social skills, and managing emotions, which areas do you need to focus on the most? Okay. Motivation and managing emotions. Everybody must be a social butterfly. Okay, motivation and managing emotions. All right. Next question. In which area do you believe you are the strongest? You are the strongest. So whether you took the assessment or not, which areas do you believe you are the strongest? Self-awareness, motivation, empathy, social skills, managing emotions. Awesome. We've got a lot of empathetic people in the room, which is fantastic. So nobody high on motivation, so that's okay. And then we have a tie, which is kind of odd, right? Between self-awareness, social skills, and managing emotions. Fantastic. So something to consider and to think about. No matter where you are, EQ is like a muscle. The more you use the skill, the more it will develop. Now, with that being said, also that if you are surrounded by a group of people that are lower on the scale than you are, you have to be very careful because they can pull you down the scale too. So you have to be aware of where your strong points are and where you need to focus on to get a little bit better and stronger. So it is a muscle. We use it. If we use it all the time, we get stronger. If we don't, and we kind of revert back to maybe the comfort zone, or we are surrounded by people, and we all know that, right? If you are surrounded, you are a product of your surrounding. So if you are surrounded by negative people all the time, it's really hard and can be really challenging to rise up. So how do we develop emotional awareness? Notice you're experiencing emotional state. So like for me today, I knew I was very angry and very upset that I could not get out of the car wash and identify what it is and know what to expect. Now, some people that I know, if they get angry and upset, they cry. And they know that. They've told me that. They said, if I get upset, I will cry. If I get upset, I feel like I'm going to levitate off the floor. That's the way I explain myself. And I'm pretty sure my blood pressure goes through the roof because I get like an instant migraine. Know how to influence a new emotional state, which just means how do we calm ourselves down, right? So understanding an emotional state, the state part of it is the psychological feelings that you experience. And the emotional part of it is just the label we put on it. So there are typical emotional states that most of us or all of us are aware with, right? So the label is happiness. We all know what happiness is, right? Positive feeling, you're on cloud nine, right? And then not only the feeling, but your physical characteristics of when you're happy, right? You're smiling, you may have good posture, right? You're happy, you are going around and talking with other people. Sometimes when people are happy, they even talk faster or even talk a little bit higher, right? Now, I don't know if we're dancing at work because we're happy or swinging your arms, but it's generally a pleasant voice and that you're friendly. Now, people that are bored, right? It's low energy, right? Your vibration is very low, right? Unpleasant feelings. You're just like, when will this day be over? Right? You may be even physically, you may be kind of slumped, right? Or like this, or mindlessly scrolling on the internet, right? Can be boredom too, right? And some people fidget also, whether they're moving their knee or they're playing with a pen or something like that, if they're bored. Now, some people also draw pictures, right? They're drawing some scribbles. Anxiety, again, how are you feeling? For me, I always feel like anxiety feels like pressure on my chest, right? So it feels like an elephant is just sitting on my chest. That's when I feel, and I know I feel anxious. As I mentioned before, for me, my blood pressure goes up. I know that. Some people sweat, right? Hunched shoulders. They're blinking their eyes or darting their eyes, and maybe they even have an upset stomach. So again, how are we feeling? And then what is the physical manifestation of emotions? And then anger. We all know anger, right? You're very upset. It's uncomfortable feelings, right? Feeling out of control. And especially somebody that likes to keep their world in control, anger can come on pretty quick if something goes awry, right? So the physical manifestation of that is tension. Do you ever walk around like this, right? Where your shoulders have now become earrings? Yes. I clench my jaw. So that's something that I know that I do. When I'm angry, I'll clench my jaw. I'm surprised I haven't broken any teeth yet. And then behavior, right? Loud voice, yelling. We've all been there. We've all been angry. And then sad or depressed, we understand those feelings. Again, some people cry, some people just go into themselves. Sometimes when we're sad or depressed, we also protect our core or our heart area. So you will see people more like this, so they're closed off from the physical manifestation of it. And then fear. So everyone has their own response to fear, right? So that feeling of dread or impending doom or panic. So that can be an increased heart rate, increased blood pressure. Your eyes can dilate also if you are experiencing fear. So it's important to recognize those emotions so that when you're listening, what do you and others actually hear? And if we had this class in person, we would actually go through an activity that is called I Said, You Heard. And it's a really interesting activity to go through and really realize that how you are or what you are trying to communicate is not necessarily how people interpret it. Because unfortunately, right now, the biggest communication problem is that we don't listen to understand, we listen to reply. And most people catch maybe at a high end 60% of what you're saying because they're already listening or already planning in their head, whether they realize it or not, how they are going to respond or reply to what you've said. So they really only catch at the most 60% of what you have said. So in empowering relationships, as we mentioned already, people around us influence how we feel. So if you are surrounded by people that are lower on the scale, you potentially could start to feel or act in that manner too. So remember that we influence the emotions of people around us. Now, I will put in the caveat too, if you have animals like we do, so we have 3 horses, 2 cats and a dog, you already know that you can influence the emotions of your pets. One look from me to one of my horses will automatically get them in a state of upset. If I raise my voice, our one horse puts his head in the corner of the stall. Uh, you can easily impact the emotions of your animals too, or your children, and of course the people that we work. And emotions are contagious. So how do you feel? I asked this question before. How do you feel after speaking with your boss? And some people said supported, frustrated, not great, listened to, rejuvenated, or fake. I've also asked this question of how do you feel after speaking with your coworkers? And people have said frustrated, happy, aligned, calmed, renewed, and my favorite, wowza. And then how do you feel after speaking with your teams? So energized, motivated, excited, unsure, etc. So it's interesting. I want you to consider all of those questions in your head. And how do you feel after talking to your boss? How do you feel after speaking with your coworkers? And how do you feel after speaking with your teams? And that's really going to be and offer you some insight to the emotional intelligence of yourself and of the people that are surrounding you. So how do we bring this all together? So let's reflect on where you are on the EQ scale. So if you missed it on my original social media post, I can send out a link to a quick EQ assessment. But of course, you can find those too on your own. So if you didn't have a chance to do it, you most definitely can. Then you need to take an analysis to say, where do you want to be on the scale? And it changes again over time. So some of those personality tests that we've taken, so whether it is Korn Ferry or one of the other ones, right? There's many assessments out there. There's DISC, Korn Ferry, et cetera. We all know that. Some of those, they'll tell you, once you have done this assessment, that's it. It's very unlikely that it will change unless you have a major contributing factor in your life. Now, emotional intelligence, though, it can change. So you may take it today and have one response, and then something happens in your life, or you're surrounded by different people, or you change jobs and you take it a year from now, or you change companies and take it a year from now, and it can be different. You need to evaluate or reflect on your circle and where they are on the scale. And I will tell you from personal experience, sometimes you have to make some really difficult decisions. And I've had to make those decisions in my life too. That when I reflected on my circle, I realized that some of the people that I was associated with may not be the best for me long term. And sometimes, as they say, people come in to you for a reason or for a season. So, and had to say goodbye to some of those relationships because they weren't allowing me to be the true and genuine person that I am. So what do you do if your team or your manager is not on the same EQ level as you? So now what? Identify where they're different, right? Through observation or having them take the assessment. Again, if you have them take the assessment, please make sure that you clear that with HR, right? And you need to evaluate where you are compared to where they are on the emotional awareness, management, emotional, social awareness, and relationship management. So you want to identify the gap, in other words. Understand why they may react that way, or when they react that way. What are the triggers? Something really interesting that I found by working with a wide variety of organizations is sometimes the trigger is a ghost. And I'm not talking about Casper the Friendly Ghost. I'm talking about the ghost of people past. And not that they have left this earth, but they no longer work for the company or in that role. And that happens a lot in organizations. People behave a certain way, and when you finally get a chance to talk to them and have a discussion with them and say, who told you that? Or why are we doing it like this? And they'll say, Dave told me I had to do it that way. Or my supervisor. Which supervisor? Then they can't name it. Well, it was Dave. Okay, Dave hasn't worked here for like 5 years. Right? So those are the people I call the ghosts. So sometimes you do have to ask some questions of why are we doing it this way, right? Why is somebody reacting to that? Maybe Dave really yelled at that person and they felt very upset over whatever happened. So they're like, I'm never making that mistake again. And things have changed in the 5 years that Dave's been gone. Prepare in advance how you will address their needs or concerns. People want to know that you are listening and that you understand them. So a common phrase, as we all know, that people say would be, what I heard you say is, you will have to acknowledge the fact that they feel that way or they're expressing something so that they are in a situation where they understand that you are listening and you are respectful of them. And of course, you want to model the behavior you want and encourage them to rise up. We can't tell people that, or you shouldn't tell people, right, that you need to be able to handle it this way, or we don't want any yelling, or we don't want any screaming. And then 2 seconds later, you yell or scream at somebody else, right? People are always watching you. right? So if you have little kids, you know that kids are always watching, mimicking, and things like that with you. People that you work with are always watching too. And they're watching to understand what is acceptable, what can people get away with, and what is not acceptable in the work environment. And there's always ways to be able to address that. And we talk about those in future classes. So in today's quick session, we reviewed emotional intelligence origins, intrapersonal versus interpersonal, your EQ assessment and what it means, and emotions and what to do when others are not on the same level as you. So I just want to encourage you that learning never ends. If you are interested in learning more about emotional intelligence or even having a class at your organization, please let me know. I do classes from custom for you between an hour to 4 hours. It depends on your needs and your wants when we do the assessment, etc. So what I would ask is one word that describes how you feel or one item that you learned from class today. I call this word of the day. Happy. Awesome. I can't ask for any more than that, right? All right. We've got one more person typing. Thoughtful. Inspired. Difference. Encouraged. Great. It's complex, right? But it's absolutely doable. There's absolutely such great insight you can have from understanding yourself and then understanding others. So I want to thank you for your time today. Thank you for signing up. I do plan on offering free sessions every month. Next month, I will have a quick 1 hour or less intro to project management. So if you're interested in that, stay tuned to my social to see the link for that. If you are a lean continuous improvement person and you like standard work, please feel free to download the standard work templates that you see on the QR code. And I will open it up for any questions. Okay. Thank you so much for your time today. I greatly appreciate it. If you are interested in training or Kaizen events or discussions on problems in process and continuous improvement, Lean Six Sigma, project management, emotional intelligence, please feel free to reach out. And I greatly appreciate your time today. And I hope you have a fantastic and beautiful weekend because it looks like it's going to be beautiful here in Wisconsin, finally. Thank you. Have a good day.